20 candles flickered on my chocolate cake as I sat across from my parents in our modest dining room, expecting the usual birthday celebration. Instead, my father, Robert, cleared his throat with the solemnity of a funeral director. "Brian, we need to discuss your college situation." My mother, Linda, folded her hands, avoiding eye contact. "We never actually saved money for your education because, honestly, we didn't think you'd go to college or amount to much academically." The words hit like a physical blow. My 17-year-old brother, Marcus, leaned against the doorframe, completely unsurprised, as my parents continued explaining how his college fund was already fully established, along with a brand new car waiting for his upcoming birthday. The silence stretched endlessly as my parents resumed eating their birthday dinner forks, clinking against plates as though they hadn't just detonated my entire future. I stared at the melting candle wax, struggling to process what I'd heard. My mother dabbed her mouth with a napkin before continuing in the same tone she might use to discuss grocery shopping. "We made this decision when you were 12, after that rough semester, when you brought home mostly C's," she explained matter-of-factly. "Your grades were inconsistent and you seemed more interested in skateboarding than studying. We figured it made more sense to invest in Marcus, since he showed real academic promise from elementary school." My father nodded, cutting another piece of pot roast. "We took the money we'd started putting aside for you and moved it into Marcus's education account. Plus, we bought him that Toyota Camry sitting in the garage. It's practically brand new, only 8,000 miles on it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the doorway but didn't leave. I remembered that car appearing 6 months ago, supposedly a great deal my father found through his insurance connections. They told me it was a temporary purchase until they decided what to do with it. "But you always said my college money was growing in investments." I managed to say, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Every time I asked about it, you said it was doing well in the stock market." Linda shrugged, reaching for the salt. "We didn't want to discourage you completely. We figured if you really wanted higher education, you'd find a way to make it happen. Community college isn't that expensive, and there are always student loans." The casual cruelty of her words made my stomach churn. Years of conversations flashed through my memory with new painful clarity. Every time I'd mentioned college plans, career dreams, or future goals, my parents had offered vague encouragement while secretly believing I'd fail. They'd nodded politely when I talked about applying to universities, knowing they'd already decided I wasn't worth their investment. "Marcus has been accepted to 3 different state schools," my father continued proudly. "His SAT scores qualified him for partial academic scholarships, which means our savings will cover everything else comfortably. Room board, textbooks, spending money for 4 full years." I looked at Marcus, whose face had turned red with embarrassment. For the first time in our relationship, he seemed uncomfortable with the obvious favoritism. "I didn't know they never saved anything for you," he said quietly. "I thought everyone had college funds." "Well, now you know," Robert replied firmly. "Some people earn opportunities through hard work and good grades. Others have to find different paths." The implication was clear: I hadn't earned what Marcus had. Despite maintaining a solid B average through high school and never getting into serious trouble, I was somehow the family disappointment. My parents had written me off before I'd even reached my teens. "Here's what really bothers us," Linda said, setting down her fork with irritation. "You've been distant and moody for months. Family dinners, weekend activities, holidays. You always seem somewhere else mentally. We're trying to understand why you've developed such a negative attitude toward us." I almost laughed at the absurdity. They'd been systematically undermining my future, while lying to my face, then wondered why I seemed withdrawn. The pieces of their deception were falling into place, revealing years of small betrayals I'd never recognized. "There's something else you should know," my father added, consulting his phone as though checking mundane information. "We actually took out a home equity loan last year to fund Marcus's account properly. The house appraisal came back higher than expected, so we borrowed against the difference to make sure he'd have everything he needs. My parents had gone into debt for Marcus while abandoning me entirely. They'd risked our family home to secure his future while telling me to figure out my own path. The unfairness was so profound it felt surreal. Marcus finally spoke up from the doorway. Maybe I could share some of my college money with Brian. It doesn't seem fair that I get everything while he gets nothing. Absolutely not, Robert snapped. That money is specifically designated for your education. Brian is 20 years old now, old enough to take responsibility for his own decisions and their consequences. If he'd applied himself better in school, we might be having a different conversation. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The sound seemed to echo through the house, marking the moment everything changed between us. My birthday cake sat forgotten candles slowly burning down toward the frosting. I need some air, I said, heading toward the front door. Don't be dramatic about this, Linda called after me. We're not the villains here. We made practical choices based on realistic assessments of potential. That's what responsible parents do. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, finally understanding why I'd felt like an outsider in my own family for so long. It wasn't paranoia or teenage insecurity. My parents genuinely saw me as the lesser son, unworthy of the same investment they'd made in Marcus. The weight of starting over completely at 20 years old settled on my shoulders like a heavy coat. No college savings, no family support, no safety net of any kind. Just me facing an uncertain future, while my brother enjoyed every advantage our parents could provide. But as I stood there in the fading daylight, something unexpected began growing alongside the hurt and anger. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood with my family. No more wondering, no more hoping for approval that would never come. The truth was finally out in the open, painful as it was. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. 3 months after my birthday revelation, I'd settled into a brutal routine that left me exhausted but strangely determined. My alarm screamed at 5:30 every morning, giving me just enough time to shower, grab coffee, and drive to Henderson's Auto Parts for the opening shift. Tom Henderson, a gruff 58-year-old who'd owned the shop for over 20 years, had hired me despite my complete ignorance about automotive components. "You seem like you actually want to work," he'd said during my interview, which lasted exactly 10 minutes. "Half these kids come in here thinking they're doing me a favor by showing up. You need this job, and that makes all the difference." He was right. I needed every hour, every dollar, every opportunity to prove my parents wrong about my potential. The work was physically demanding, lifting heavy parts, organizing inventory, dealing with frustrated customers whose cars had broken down at the worst possible moments. But Tom treated me fairly, paid on time, and even started teaching me basic automotive knowledge during slow periods. Alternators like the heart of the electrical system, he explained while showing me rebuilt parts. Engine runs the alternator charges the battery powers everything else. Remove any piece and the whole system fails. I found myself genuinely interested in how things worked together, how each component had a specific purpose within the larger machine. There was something satisfying about matching customers with exactly the right parts to solve their problems. My shift ended at 2 o'clock, giving me barely enough time to grab lunch and drive across town to Riverside Diner for the dinner rush. Grace Martinez, the 34-year-old manager, had taken a chance on hiring someone with zero restaurant experience. A single mother raising 2 kids while putting herself through nursing school, she understood the desperation of working multiple jobs to build a better future. "Tables 4 through 8 are yours tonight," she'd say, handing me an order pad. "Remember, smile even when customers are jerks. Check on drinks every 10 minutes and always ask if they want dessert. Tips pay your bills. Wages barely cover gas money." The diner attracted a mixed crowd: construction workers grabbing quick dinners after long shifts, families celebrating small occasions they couldn't afford to commemorate anywhere, fancier college students like me stretching tight budgets. I learned to read customers quickly: who needed efficient service, who wanted friendly conversation, who just wanted to be left alone with their coffee and newspaper. Danny Walsh, a 23-year-old coworker finishing his engineering degree, became my closest friend during those exhausting months. We worked the same evening shifts, shared similar struggles, and understood each other's determination to escape our circumstances through education and hard work. My dad walked out when I was 15. He told me during a brief break between dinner rushes. Mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us housed and fed. No college fund, no family support, no backup plan if I failed. Just me, student loans, and whatever I could earn slinging hash browns and coffee. We often compared schedules between orders. His morning classes followed by afternoon laboratory work. My community college courses squeezed between job shifts, both of us surviving on 4 hours of sleep and stubborn determination. The diner became our second home grace, our surrogate mother figure, and our shared exhaustion a badge of honor. Meanwhile, my parents continued their bewildering campaign to make me feel guilty about my absence from family activities. They'd call during my 15-minute breaks, wondering why I couldn't attend Sunday dinners, weekend barbecues, or Marcus's various high school events. Their genuine confusion about my busy schedule would have been comical if it weren't so infuriating. "We barely see you anymore." My mother complained during one such call. "You're working yourself to death over something that could probably wait until you're older and more established." She truly didn't understand that my education couldn't wait, that every semester I delayed meant falling further behind my peers, accumulating more debt, losing more opportunities. In her mind, college was optional for me, a nice hobby I could pursue later if I really wanted to, not the urgent necessity it had become. Marcus, meanwhile, coasted through his senior year with the confidence of someone whose future was completely secure. He'd get his car detailed every Wednesday, spend Friday nights at expensive restaurants with friends, and plan elaborate college visits to campuses across 3 different states. When our paths crossed at home, he seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the obvious disparity in our situations. "You don't have to work this much," he said one evening, finding me studying at the kitchen table after my diner shift. "Mom and Dad aren't trying to punish you. They just think you're being dramatic about the whole college thing." Dramatic. I looked up from my accounting textbook, genuinely incredulous. "I'm working 70 hours a week to pay for something you're getting handed for free. What exactly is dramatic about that?" He didn't have an answer, just shrugged and grabbed a soda from the refrigerator. The casual way he moved through the house, taking everything for granted, reminded me daily of how differently we'd been raised within the same family. My grades remained solid despite the exhaustion, mostly B's with occasional A's in subjects that genuinely interested me. My accounting professor, Dr. Sarah Kim, noticed my dedication and started offering extra credit opportunities that helped boost my GPA. She'd grown up in similar circumstances working her way through college without family support, and recognized the determination in students who truly needed their education to succeed. "Intelligence isn't everything," she told me after class one day. "Work ethic, persistence, and genuine motivation matter more than natural ability. You have all 3, which puts you ahead of students who've never had to fight for anything." Her encouragement meant everything during those dark months when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm my determination. Some nights I'd fall asleep over my textbooks, wake up with pen marks on my cheek, and drag myself to Henderson's for another day of physical labor, followed by another night of serving customers who complained about everything from coffee temperature to the speed of service. But I was making progress, slowly, expensively, exhaustingly, but moving forward nonetheless. My bank account grew by small increments, my knowledge expanded through evening classes, and my confidence built through the daily proof that I could handle adult responsibilities without family assistance. The real test came during Marcus's graduation party planning, when my parents expected me to contribute both time and money towards celebrating their golden child's achievements. That conversation would reveal just how completely they'd failed to understand what they'd done to our family relationships. I was about to discover that their deception went far deeper than I'd imagined, and my patience with their lies was running out faster than my energy for maintaining family peace. Spring semester brought a new level of desperation as I realized how completely trapped I was in the middle-class financial aid wasteland. My community college guidance counselor, Patricia Rowe, spread rejection letters across her desk like tarot cards, predicting a bleak future. Each envelope contained the same crushing message: our family income was too high for need-based assistance, but my individual achievements weren't exceptional enough for merit scholarships. It's the worst possible position, Patricia explained, her 45 years of experience evident in her tired but compassionate eyes. Your parents make just enough money that financial aid algorithms assume they're contributing to your education. The system doesn't account for families who choose not to support one child while fully funding another. She pulled up my financial aid profile on her computer screen, pointing to the numbers that had become my prison sentence. Your father's insurance adjuster salary plus your mother's part-time bookkeeping puts your household right in the dead zone. Too wealthy for substantial aid, not wealthy enough for college to be easily affordable. I'd applied for every scholarship opportunity we could find: academic achievement awards, community service recognition essay contests, even obscure grants for students with specific career interests. The rejection pile grew weekly, each letter a small defeat that reminded me how ordinary my accomplishments seemed when compared to applicants whose families had prepared them for academic success from birth. Have you considered taking a gap year to establish financial independence? Patricia asked gently. If you work full-time for 12 months without receiving family support, you might qualify as an independent student for aid purposes. The suggestion felt like admitting defeat, but I was beginning to understand that traditional timelines might not apply to my situation. While Marcus would graduate high school directly into a fully funded college experience, I might need years to achieve what he'd receive as a birthright. My parents, meanwhile, had become increasingly insistent that I participate in Marcus's upcoming graduation celebration. They'd planned an elaborate backyard party for 60 relatives and friends, complete with catered food, professional decorations, and a photographer to document their successful parenting. My absence from planning meetings had become a source of family tension they couldn't understand. "This is your brother's major milestone," my mother said during one of her persistent phone calls. "Whatever issues you think you have with us, don't take them out on Marcus. He's worked hard for this achievement." The irony was staggering. Marcus had worked hard within a system designed to ensure his success, while I was grinding through days that would have broken most people my age. Yet somehow I was the selfish one for not enthusiastically celebrating advantages I'd been denied. Uncle Frank, my father's older brother, called that week to confirm his attendance at the party. A successful contractor who'd built his business from nothing, Frank had always been more supportive of my work ethic than my own parents. During our brief conversation, he mentioned something that stopped me cold. "I'm looking forward to catching up with you at the party," he said. "Your dad tells me you're doing great with your college savings, really being responsible about managing your education funding. He's proud of how independent you've become." My parents had been lying to extended family about my situation, creating a completely fictional narrative that portrayed their abandonment as my mature choice. According to their version, I was responsibly attending community college to save money while my college fund grew safely in investments. They'd transformed their betrayal into evidence of their successful parenting and my admirable financial wisdom. The deception was so comprehensive it took my breath away. Not only had they sabotaged my education funding, but they'd also stolen credit for my struggles by pretending my hard work was part of their plan. Every relative who complimented my smart approach to college was unknowingly praising a lie designed to protect my parents' reputation. I realized they'd never told anyone about redirecting my college savings to Marcus, never mentioned their belief that I wouldn't succeed academically, never acknowledged the true reason behind our different treatment. Instead, they'd crafted a story that made them look wise and me look mature. Hiding the cruel reality behind a facade of responsible family financial planning, the graduation party loomed ahead like a reckoning. 60 relatives would gather to celebrate Marcus's achievement while operating under completely false assumptions about our family dynamics. My parents expected me to smile, participate enthusiastically, and maintain their carefully constructed lies through my presence and behavior. But something had shifted inside me during those months of exhaustion and rejection letters. The scared 20-year-old who'd accepted his parents' birthday revelation with stunned silence was evolving into someone angrier, more determined, and far less willing to protect people who'd never protected him. Uncle Frank's casual mention of my supposed college fund had revealed the full scope of their deception. They weren't just denying me opportunities, they were actively stealing credit for my response to their betrayal. Every hour I worked, every class I attended, every sacrifice I made was being reframed as evidence of their successful parenting rather than my determination to survive their abandonment. The party was 2 weeks away. I had 14 days to decide whether to continue enabling their lies or finally tell the truth about what they'd done to our family. The scared part of me wanted to avoid confrontation, maintain family peace, and handle my struggles privately without involving relatives who couldn't change anything anyway. But the angry part of me was growing stronger every day, fed by rejection, letters, exhaustion, and the bitter knowledge that my parents were profiting socially from my suffering. They wanted me at the party to validate their fiction, to serve as living proof that their version of events was true. For the first time since my birthday revelation, I began considering whether family loyalty was something I owed to people who'd never shown it to me. The graduation party would be my first real test of whether I'd continue protecting them or finally start protecting myself. The answer was becoming clearer with each passing day, and it wasn't what my parents expected. Marcus's graduation party arrived on a perfect May afternoon, with 60 relatives scattered across our backyard under rented canopies and string lights. The caterers had outdone themselves with a spread that probably cost more than I earned in 3 months, while a professional photographer captured every moment of my family's celebration. I'd arrived reluctantly dressed in my only decent shirt, prepared to endure a few hours of forced smiles before escaping back to my real life. Uncle Frank found me within minutes, his weathered contractor's hands gripping my shoulders with genuine affection. At 55, he'd built a successful business through decades of hard work and had always respected my determination more than my parents appreciated. His wife Diane, a sharp-eyed real estate agent, joined us along with their daughter Jessica, who was wrapping up her freshman year at an expensive private university. "Brian, you look exhausted," Aunt Diane observed with concern. "Are you getting enough sleep? Your father mentioned you're working some part-time jobs while attending school." The casual way she mentioned my part-time jobs revealed how thoroughly my parents had minimized my situation to the extended family. 2 full-time positions that consumed 70 hours weekly had been reduced to casual part-time work in their narrative. "It's a bit more than part-time," I replied, carefully testing the waters. "I'm working full shifts at an auto parts store and a diner to cover my tuition and living expenses." Uncle Frank's expression shifted immediately. "Full shifts at both places? That sounds like more than full-time hours total. Why aren't you using your college savings to focus on academics?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, relatives chatted and laughed, while Marcus held court near the gift table opening cards containing checks and congratulations for his bright future. The photographer snapped pictures of our family's proud moment, while I stood at the center of a lie that had grown too heavy to carry. Actually, there are no college savings, I said quietly. My parents redirected my education fund to Marcus when I was 12. They never saved anything for my college expenses. Uncle Frank's face darkened as the implications registered. Aunt Diane's mouth fell open in shock while Jessica stared at me with dawning understanding. The casual family gathering suddenly felt charged with tension as my simple statement of truth collided with months of carefully maintained fiction. "That's impossible," Frank said slowly. "Your father specifically told me your college money was doing well in investments, that you chose community college to be financially responsible while your fund grew." "He's been lying to everyone," I replied, my voice growing stronger. "They took my savings and bought Marcus a car, established his college fund, and left me to figure out my own education. Then they've been telling relatives I chose this situation to make themselves look like good parents." The conversation had attracted attention from nearby relatives, who began drifting closer with the instinct people develop for family drama. My parents noticed the gathering crowd and started moving in our direction, probably assuming I was receiving congratulations for my supposed financial wisdom. "Brian, what's going on over here?" my mother asked with forced cheerfulness, her bookkeeper's instincts warning her that something was wrong with the numbers of this interaction. "I was just explaining to Uncle Frank why I don't have access to college savings," I said, meeting her eyes directly. "You know the truth about what happened to my education fund." My father arrived just in time to hear the challenge in my voice. His insurance adjuster training had taught him to assess liability quickly, and he immediately recognized this as a situation that could damage his reputation if not handled carefully. "Brian's being a bit dramatic about his financial situation," Robert said with a dismissive laugh. "We've explained that there are many paths to higher education, and he's chosen to start with community college while exploring his options. That's a complete lie," I said loudly enough the conversations throughout the backyard began pausing. "You didn't give me options. You spent my college money on Marcus and left me to work 2 jobs just to afford basic classes." The gathering crowd included cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd known me since childhood. They'd watched me grow up believing I was loved and supported equally with my brother. Now they were witnessing the public revelation that everything they'd assumed about our family dynamics was false. Uncle Frank stepped forward, his contractor's authority commanding attention. "Robert, is this true? Did you actually take Brian's college savings and give them to Marcus?" "It's more complicated than that," my father began, but Uncle Frank cut him off. "It's a simple question with a simple answer. Did you or didn't you?" The silence stretched uncomfortably as my parents realized their carefully constructed story was collapsing in front of their entire social circle. Marcus stood frozen near the gift table, probably wishing he could disappear into the ground rather than be at the center of this family explosion. "We made financial decisions based on realistic assessments of potential," Linda finally said, her part-time bookkeeper's precision failing to soften the cruelty of her words. "Some children show academic promise early, while others need to find different paths to success." Different paths. Aunt Diane's real estate agent instincts for fairness were offended. "You're talking about your own son like he's a bad investment. What kind of parents write off their child's potential at 12 years old?" "The responsible kind," Robert replied defensively. "We couldn't afford to fund 2 college educations fully, so we invested in the child who demonstrated consistent academic excellence. Brian can still attend college. He's just paying his own way like millions of other students. While his brother gets everything handed to him," Jessica added quietly. Her private university experience had taught her about privilege and inequality, but she'd never seen it operating within a single family. The party celebration had completely stopped now. 60 relatives and friends stood in uncomfortable clusters, witnessing a family implosion that revealed years of hidden favoritism and deception. The photographer continued taking pictures, probably wondering if this drama would be included in the official memories. "There's more," I said, feeling momentum building. "They didn't just redirect my savings. They told everyone I chose community college to save money while my college fund grew in investments. They've been lying to all of you for months, making themselves look wise while I work myself to exhaustion." Uncle Frank's contractor business had taught him to recognize structural problems that could bring down entire buildings. He was looking at my parents now like they were a foundation that couldn't support the weight it was supposed to bear. "Robert, I offered to contribute $5,000 toward Brian's education last month," Frank said slowly. "You told me he had everything covered financially and didn't need help. Were you lying then too?" My father's face reddened as the scope of his deception became clear. He'd turned down financial help for me, while claiming I didn't need it all to maintain the fiction that his decisions were wise and fair. But the real revelation was still coming, triggered by my mother's defensive anger at being called a liar in front of her entire social circle. "We didn't just use his college savings." Linda snapped, her bookkeeper's instinct for accuracy finally overriding her desire for family peace. "We also cashed in his childhood savings bonds to help pay for Marcus's car. The bonds his grandparents gave him for birthdays and holidays. We used all of them." The words hung in the air like a confession at a murder trial. My parents hadn't just denied me opportunities, they'd literally stolen money that was specifically intended for me, money that loving grandparents had given as gifts throughout my childhood. Uncle Frank took a step back, looking at his brother like he'd never seen him before. "You stole money from your own son, gifts that were meant specifically for him." "We needed the funds for family expenses," Robert said weakly, but his excuse sounded pathetic even to him. The party was over. Not officially. The caterers were still serving food, and the photographer was still taking pictures, but emotionally, morally, completely over. My family's reputation lay in ruins around us, destroyed by the simple act of telling the truth about what they'd done. Marcus finally found his voice from across the yard. "I didn't know about the savings bonds." He called out, his 17-year-old face pale with horror. "I never asked them to take Brian's money. I thought everyone got college funds." "Well, now you know," I replied, looking around at the shocked faces of relatives who were reassessing everything they'd believed about our family. "Now everyone knows." The explosion was complete. The carefully maintained fiction had shattered, revealing the ugly truth underneath. My parents stood exposed as people who'd betrayed their own child, then lied about it to save face, while I stood vindicated but emotionally drained from finally speaking truth that should never have needed to be spoken. The real question now was what would happen next, because there was no going back from this moment. The family dynamics that had operated in shadows for years were now under harsh public scrutiny, and my parents would have to decide whether to double down on their defensiveness or finally face what they'd done. But that was their choice to make. I'd done my part by refusing to protect people who'd never protected me. The graduation party ended in awkward clusters of relatives exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch, their polite Midwestern manners barely containing their shock at what they'd witnessed. Most guests left quickly once the family drama overshadowed Marcus's celebration, leaving behind expensive catering food and a backyard full of decorations that now felt like props from a canceled play. Uncle Frank approached me as I prepared to leave, his contractor's practical mindset already shifting into problem-solving mode. "This conversation isn't over," he said quietly, glancing toward my parents, who were cleaning up with grim efficiency. "Come by my office Monday after work. We need to figure out what really happened with your money." Monday evening found me sitting in Frank's construction office, surrounded by blueprints and building permits, while he made phone calls with the focused determination of someone who'd spent decades solving complex problems. His business success had taught him to investigate thoroughly before making decisions, and my parents' financial deception had triggered every red flag his experience had developed. I called your grandfather's old bank, he said, hanging up after the third conversation. Those savings bonds weren't small amounts. Your grandparents deposited $50 every birthday and Christmas from the time you were born until they passed away when you were 15. That's over $4,000 in bonds that were specifically designated for your education. The number hit me like a physical blow. $4,000 represented months of my current struggle money that could have covered textbooks, transportation, and living expenses while I focused on academics instead of survival. My grandparents had planned for my future with the careful attention my parents had denied me, only to have their gifts stolen and redirected to benefit the child who already had everything. There's more. Frank continued, pulling out a yellow legal pad covered with notes. I've been talking to people at both banks your parents use. The timeline of transactions is suspicious enough that it might qualify as financial fraud, especially regarding the bonds that were specifically in your name. He'd spent his afternoon making calls with the persistence of someone genuinely angry about injustice. His construction business had taught him about proper documentation and legal procedure skills that were proving invaluable in untangling my parents' financial manipulations. My daughter Jessica connected me with a family lawyer she knows from college, Frank said, sliding a business card across his desk. Michael Santos specializes in financial disputes between relatives. He's agreed to review the situation without charging for the initial consultation. The card felt heavy in my hand, representing possibilities I'd never considered. For months, I'd accepted my parents' betrayal as something I had to overcome through work and determination. The idea that their actions might have legal consequences hadn't occurred to me. But Uncle Frank's investigation was revealing a pattern of deception that went far beyond simple family favoritism. I don't want to sue my own parents, I said, voicing the fear that had been growing since Frank started talking about lawyers and fraud. I just want them to acknowledge what they did and maybe help me catch up financially. Sometimes legal pressure is the only thing that makes people do the right thing, Frank replied with the wisdom of someone who dealt with dishonest contractors and unreliable clients. Your parents have been lying to everyone for years. They're not going to suddenly develop consciences without consequences. That evening at Riverside Diner, I shared Frank's discoveries with Grace Martinez during our brief break between dinner rushes. Her nursing school experience had taught her about systematic problems that required systematic solutions, and she listened to my story with the focused attention of someone who understood how institutions could fail individuals. My brother-in-law went through something similar with his ex-wife, she said, wiping down tables while we talked. She'd been using their kids' savings accounts to fund her shopping addiction. He tried handling it privately for years, but she kept taking more money and lying about it. Legal intervention was the only thing that stopped her. Grace connected me with Michael Santos the next day, arranging for me to meet with him after my auto parts shift. His office occupied the second floor of a modest building near downtown, furnished with the practical efficiency of someone who handled real problems for working-class clients rather than corporate executives. Michael Santos appeared younger than his 38 years, but his questions revealed the sharp intelligence that had built his reputation for helping families navigate financial disputes. He listened to my story without interruption, taking notes with the precision of someone who'd heard similar tales of family betrayal many times before. The savings bonds issue is particularly serious, he said after reviewing Frank's documentation. Those were gifts specifically designated for you with your Social Security number attached. Using them without your knowledge or consent constitutes theft regardless of family relationships. He explained the legal landscape with clarity that made complex issues understandable. Financial fraud between family members was more common than people realized, often involving parents who felt entitled to use their children's money for purposes the parents considered more important. The law didn't recognize family relationships as excuses for financial crimes, but proving intent could be challenging when parents claimed they were managing family resources for everyone's benefit. There's another issue we need to investigate, Michael said, pulling up his computer. If your parents used your social security number for any financial transactions without your knowledge that could affect your credit history, you should pull your credit report immediately to see what shows up. The credit report revealed the scope of my parents' deception extended far beyond college savings. They'd taken out a student loan in my name when I was 18, supposedly, to establish my credit history, but had used the money to help fund Marcus's car purchase. The loan appeared on my credit report as active debt that I'd never known existed, affecting my credit score and potentially complicating future financial aid applications. This is identity theft, Michael said, grimly, pointing to the unauthorized loan on his computer screen. Your parents have been using your personal information to access credit you didn't authorize. That's a federal crime regardless of their intentions or family relationships. The investigation was revealing a pattern of financial abuse that went far deeper than the college fund disparity I'd discovered on my birthday. My parents hadn't just denied me opportunities. They'd actively damaged my financial future while building advantages for my brother through systematic deception and possible criminal behavior. Danny Walsh, my coworker at the diner, shared his own experience during our next shift together. My mom did something similar when I was 19. He said while refilling coffee makers. She took out credit cards in my name to pay for her boyfriend's truck. I didn't find out until I applied for student loans and discovered my credit was destroyed. His situation had required legal intervention to resolve, involving identity theft charges that eventually forced his mother to make financial restitution and enter credit counseling. The process had been emotionally devastating, but legally necessary to protect his future from her financial irresponsibility. Family loyalty works both ways, he told me while we cleaned tables after the dinner rush. If they're not loyal to you, you don't owe them protection from the consequences of their choices. Uncle Frank offered me temporary housing in his finished basement apartment, providing escape from my parents' house, while we pursued legal options. The small space included a kitchenette, private bathroom, and separate entrance that would allow me to focus on work and school without daily confrontations about family loyalty and forgiveness. You can't heal from abuse while you're still living with the abusers, Grace observed when I told her about Frank's offer. Sometimes you need physical distance before you can gain emotional clarity about what really happened. The investigation had transformed my understanding of my situation from personal disappointment to systematic victimization. My parents weren't just unsupportive. They were actively harmful, using my identity and resources to benefit themselves and my brother, while sabotaging my future through deception and possible criminal behavior. Michael Santos scheduled a formal meeting with my parents for the following week, armed with documentation that would force them to confront the legal implications of their choices. The scared 20-year-old who'd accepted their birthday revelation with stunned silence was evolving into someone prepared to fight for justice, regardless of family relationships. The investigation had revealed that my parents' betrayal was far worse than I'd imagined. But it had also revealed that I had more power to respond than I'd realized. Legal consequences were possible. Financial restitution was achievable, and family loyalty wasn't something I owed to people who'd systematically betrayed mine. The question now was whether my parents would acknowledge their mistakes and make amends, or whether they'd force me to pursue every legal option available to protect my future from their continued deception. The meeting took place in Michael Santos's office on a Wednesday afternoon, with my parents arriving separately from me in a gesture that already felt like battle lines being drawn. Uncle Frank accompanied me for emotional support, while my parents brought their own attitude of defensive indignation, clearly believing this legal intervention was an overreaction to normal family financial decisions. Michael had arranged the conference room with professional efficiency documents spread across the table, a digital recorder in the center, and copies of financial records that told the story of years of systematic deception. My parents sat across from us, looking uncomfortable, but not yet understanding the serious legal jeopardy their choices had created. Before we begin, Michael said formally, I want to clarify that this meeting is being recorded with everyone's consent and that you have the right to legal representation if you choose. We're here to discuss financial transactions involving your son, Brian, that may constitute fraud, identity theft, and conversion of funds specifically designated for his benefit. The legal terminology seemed to surprise my father, whose insurance adjuster experience had taught him to recognize liability issues. He glanced at my mother with the first hint of concern I'd seen since this process began. Michael opened the first folder with practiced precision. Let's start with the savings bonds issue. We have documentation showing that Brian's grandparents purchased over $4,000 in bonds specifically in his name, using his Social Security number for the designated purpose of funding his education. These bonds were cashed without his knowledge or consent, with proceeds used to purchase a vehicle for his brother Marcus. He slid copies of bank records across the table showing the bond redemption dates and corresponding deposits into accounts used for Marcus's benefit. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, laid out with the clarity that legal documentation demanded. We considered those family assets. My mother said defensively, her bookkeeper's training, making her focus on technicalities rather than ethics. Parents manage their minor children's finances all the time. We made decisions we thought were best for the family as a whole. Brian wasn't a minor when you cashed the final bonds, Michael replied calmly. He was 19 years old, legally an adult, and you never informed him of the transactions. That constitutes theft regardless of family relationships. Uncle Frank leaned forward with the controlled anger of someone whose core values had been violated. Robert, those bonds were gifts from our parents, specifically for Brian's education. Mom and Dad saved money from their fixed income to help their grandson, and you stole it. The accusation hung in the air with the weight of absolute truth. My grandparents had sacrificed to provide for my future, trusting that their son would honor their intentions, only to have their gifts redirected to benefit the grandchild who already had every advantage. Michael opened the second folder, revealing the unauthorized student loan documentation. This is more serious. We have evidence that you took out a student loan using Brian's personal information without his knowledge or consent. The loan proceeds were used for family expenses rather than Brian's education, and the debt appears on his credit report as his responsibility. My father's face paled as the legal implications became clear. Identity theft was a federal crime with serious penalties, and his insurance industry background had taught him enough about fraud investigations to recognize that his position was legally indefensible. We were trying to establish his credit history, he said weakly. Young people need credit records to function in the adult world. We thought taking out a small loan in his name would help him later. But you used the money for your own purposes, Michael countered. That's textbook identity theft and loan fraud. The fact that you're related to the victim doesn't change the criminal nature of the act. He produced credit reports showing how the unauthorized loan had affected my credit score, potentially impacting my ability to secure future educational financing, housing, or employment opportunities. Their help with my credit history had actually damaged my financial future while benefiting their immediate family needs. There's also the issue of ongoing deception to extended family members, Michael continued. We have evidence that you've been misrepresenting Brian's financial situation to relatives claiming he chose community college, while his college fund grew in investments, when in fact you'd redirected his education savings to benefit Marcus. Uncle Frank produced his own notes from conversations with family members who'd been operating under false assumptions about my situation. My parents had created an elaborate fiction that portrayed their betrayal as my wise choice, stealing credit for my struggles while avoiding accountability for their decisions. The pattern of behavior suggests systematic financial abuse designed to benefit one child at the expense of another while concealing the truth from family and friends who might have intervened if they'd known the facts, Michael summarized with legal precision. The room fell silent as the full scope of their deception was laid bare in language that stripped away family emotions and revealed the criminal behavior underneath. My parents looked smaller somehow, their justifications crumbling under the weight of legal documentation and professional analysis. Marcus chose that moment to enter the office having driven directly from school after learning about the meeting. At 17, he looked young and overwhelmed by the serious adult consequences of favoritism he'd enjoyed without questioning. "I want to give Brian half of my college money," he announced without preamble. "This whole situation is messed up, and I can't enjoy advantages that came from stealing from my brother." His offer surprised everyone, including me. Despite benefiting from our parents' choices, Marcus had developed enough moral clarity to recognize the fundamental unfairness of our situations. His willingness to share his advantages demonstrated the kind of family loyalty our parents had never shown. "That's very generous," Michael said carefully, "but it doesn't address the legal issues we're discussing. Financial restitution needs to come from the people who committed the wrongful acts, not from another victim of their poor judgment." He turned back to my parents with the focused intensity of someone prepared to pursue every legal option available. "Here's what needs to happen. First, immediate restitution for the stolen savings bonds, plus interest calculated from the redemption dates. Second, assumption of the unauthorized student loan debt removal of negative credit impacts and compensation for damages to Brian's credit history. Third, establishment of an education fund equivalent to Marcus's original amount, plus coverage of legal fees and administrative costs." The financial demands were substantial, but fair, representing actual damages, plus consequences serious enough to deter future misconduct. My parents would have to sacrifice significantly to make things right, but their sacrifices would be voluntary restitution rather than the involuntary victimization they'd imposed on me. "And if we refuse," my father asked his insurance background, making him assess worst-case scenarios, "then we file criminal charges for identity theft and fraud, pursue civil litigation for financial damages, and notify extended family members about the true nature of your actions," Michael replied matter-of-factly. "The evidence is overwhelming. The crimes are clear, and Brian has been patient enough with private resolution attempts." Uncle Frank added his own ultimatum with the authority of someone whose opinion carried weight in family dynamics. "Robert, you'll also be banned from my construction sites, excluded from family gatherings I host, and cut off from business referrals I've provided over the years. I won't associate with people who steal from their own children, then lie about it." The social consequences were potentially as devastating as the legal ones. My parents had built their reputations on appearing to be responsible, caring family people. Public revelation of their financial abuse would destroy relationships and social standing they'd spent decades building. But the most surprising revelation was still to come, triggered by my mother's desperate attempt to minimize their liability by revealing information she'd previously hidden. "We don't have enough liquid assets to pay everything immediately." Linda said her bookkeeper's precision finally serving honesty instead of deception. "Most of our savings are tied up in the rental property we inherited from my aunt, plus investments we've never declared on family financial discussions." Uncle Frank's head snapped up with sharp attention. "What rental property? What investments, Robert? You've been claiming financial hardship while sitting on undeclared assets." My parents had been hiding additional wealth while portraying themselves as a middle-class family, forced to make difficult choices about college funding. They owned rental property generating monthly income, plus investment accounts they'd never mentioned during years of discussions about educational expenses and family financial limitations. The revelation transformed their betrayal from misguided favoritism into calculated deception designed to hoard wealth while forcing me into poverty through lies about their capabilities. They had the resources to fund both children's educations comfortably. They'd simply chosen not to. This changes everything, Michael said grimly. Hidden assets during financial hardship claims could constitute fraud in multiple contexts. You've been lying about your ability to support both children while systematically enriching yourselves at Brian's expense. The meeting ended with a formal ultimatum: complete financial restitution within 30 days, or face criminal charges and civil litigation that would expose every detail of their deception to legal scrutiny and public judgment. My parents left looking devastated but not yet willing to admit they'd done anything fundamentally wrong. Marcus stayed behind to discuss his offer to share his college fund, demonstrating more moral courage at 17 than our parents had shown in years of systematic betrayal. His willingness to sacrifice his advantages for family fairness represented the kind of values our parents had failed to teach through their actions. The confrontation was over, but the resolution was just beginning. My parents had 7 days to decide whether they'd make things right voluntarily or force me to pursue every legal remedy available to protect my future from their continued lies and financial abuse. For the first time since my 20th birthday revelation, I felt like I had real power to demand justice rather than simply enduring injustice with quiet determination. 6 days after our legal confrontation, my parents called Michael Santos's office, requesting an emergency meeting to discuss settlement terms. Uncle Frank and I arrived to find them looking haggard and defeated, accompanied by their own attorney, who'd apparently explained the serious legal jeopardy their choices had created. The weight of potential criminal charges had finally broken through their defensive denial. My clients are prepared to accept full responsibility for their financial misconduct and make complete restitution according to your demands, their lawyer announced formally. They understand the gravity of identity theft and fraud charges, and they want to resolve this matter without criminal prosecution. Michael spread the settlement documents across the conference table with professional satisfaction. Months of investigation had produced ironclad evidence that left my parents no room for negotiation or continued deception. They would pay for their betrayal in ways that ensured I could build the future they'd tried to deny me. The financial terms were comprehensive and substantial. Immediate restitution of $4,600 for the stolen savings bonds, including calculated interest from redemption dates. Complete assumption of the unauthorized student loan removal of all negative credit impacts, and $5,000 in damages for credit history repair and monitoring services. Establishment of an education fund containing $28,000, matching Marcus's original college account plus penalties for their deception. But the non-financial terms carried equal importance for preventing future abuse. Written acknowledgement of their financial misconduct signed under oath and notarized for legal enforceability. Prohibition from accessing my personal financial information or using my identity for any purpose without explicit written consent. Agreement to attend family financial responsibility counseling as condition of avoiding criminal prosecution. There's one more requirement, Michael added, consulting his notes. Brian wants the true story told to all extended family members who were deceived by your false narrative about his college situation. You'll send written explanations to everyone who attended the graduation party, acknowledging your lies and apologizing for involving them in your deception. My parents' social reputation would suffer permanent damage from these required admissions, but their lies had damaged family relationships and my standing with relatives who'd operated under false assumptions for years. Justice required not just financial restitution, but social accountability for the comprehensive nature of their betrayal. Marcus had insisted on joining the settlement meeting, carrying a folder of documents that surprised everyone, including his attorney. I want to legally transfer half of my remaining college fund to Brian, he announced with 17-year-old determination. I've been talking to financial aid counselors, and I can cover my education with partial scholarships, plus my reduced savings. Brian deserves equal treatment, and I'm not comfortable enjoying advantages that came from stealing his money. His moral courage shamed our parents more effectively than any legal threat could have achieved. Their younger son, supposedly the deserving child who'd earned preferential treatment through academic excellence, had developed better ethical judgment than they demonstrated through years of systematic favoritism and deception. The final settlement provided me with over $40,000 in combined restitution damages and shared family resources, enough to transfer to a 4-year university focus on academics instead of survival, and build the future my grandparents had envisioned when they'd started buying savings bonds for my education decades earlier. Uncle Frank offered me permanent residence in his basement apartment at below-market rent, creating the stable housing situation I needed to succeed academically without depending on people who'd proven themselves untrustworthy. His construction business also provided part-time employment that would supplement my educational funding without requiring the exhausting schedule I'd maintained at 2 separate jobs. Grace Martinez celebrated the settlement like a personal victory when I shared the news during my final shift at Riverside Diner. "You proved that hard work and persistence pay off," she said, while helping me clear my last tables. "But more importantly, you proved that young people can fight back when adults abuse their power. That's a lesson worth more than any college degree." Danny Walsh, my fellow student and coworker, had watched my legal battle with admiration and growing confidence about his own family situation. "Seeing you stand up to your parents helped me realize I don't have to accept my mom's financial irresponsibility," he told me during our goodbye conversation. "I'm meeting with a lawyer next week about the credit card she took out in my name." Tom Henderson at the auto parts store expressed genuine pride in my determination when I gave notice to focus on university studies. "You came here needing work, and you're leaving ready for bigger things," he said with the gruff affection of someone who'd watched me grow from desperate teenager into confident young adult. That's what America's supposed to be about, people improving their situations through effort and character. I enrolled at State University for fall semester, using settlement funds to secure campus housing and focus entirely on academic achievement. My intended major in business administration with concentration in financial planning reflected lessons learned through surviving my parents' financial abuse. I wanted to help other families avoid the destructive patterns that had nearly derailed my future. My parents completed their court-ordered financial counseling with mixed results. My father seemed genuinely remorseful about the damage he'd caused, expressing willingness to rebuild our relationship through consistent, honest behavior over time. My mother remained defensive and resentful, apparently believing she'd been unfairly punished for making practical family financial decisions. The extended family relationships fractured along predictable lines. Uncle Frank and Aunt Diane became my chosen family, providing emotional support and practical guidance as I navigated university life. Other relatives expressed shock and disappointment about my parents' deception, with several offering additional financial support for my education as gesture of family solidarity. Marcus and I developed a stronger relationship built on mutual respect, rather than sibling rivalry manufactured by parental favoritism. He thrived at his chosen university while maintaining regular contact and showing genuine interest in my academic progress. Our shared experience of surviving dysfunctional family dynamics created bonds that normal sibling relationships often lack. The legal settlement included ongoing monitoring provisions to ensure my parents honored their commitments completely. Michael Santos's office tracked their compliance with payment schedules and credit repair requirements, ready to pursue criminal charges if they violated any settlement terms. The threat of prosecution remained real and immediate, ensuring their cooperation continued beyond their initial fear. 6 months later, I maintained a solid B+ average while adjusting to university-level academics, without the crushing pressure of working multiple jobs simultaneously. My business classes provided practical knowledge about financial management, investment strategies, and ethical decision-making that I applied both to my own situation and hypothetical family scenarios. The settlement money was lasting longer than projected thanks to careful budgeting and part-time work with Uncle Frank's construction crew during summer breaks. I was learning practical skills while earning supplemental income, building the kind of well-rounded experience that would serve me regardless of my eventual career path. My story had become local legend among financial aid counselors and family law attorneys who'd heard about the case through professional networks. Several had reached out requesting permission to use my experience as educational example for other students facing family financial abuse. The attention was uncomfortable, but potentially helpful for preventing similar situations. The most profound change was psychological rather than financial. I'd learned that family loyalty was something earned through behavior rather than demanded through biological relationships. People who systematically betrayed my trust and sabotaged my future didn't deserve protection from consequences simply because we shared DNA and childhood memories. But I'd also learned that chosen family could provide support and love that biological family had failed to offer. Uncle Frank's mentorship, Grace's encouragement, and Marcus's moral courage had sustained me through the darkest period of young adult life. Their loyalty meant more than my parents' belated apologies because it was freely given rather than legally compelled. The experience taught me that justice was possible even when power dynamics seemed overwhelming. Young people could fight back against adult abuse through legal systems designed to protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation. The process required courage, persistence, and good advice, but it offered real remedies for real harm. Most importantly, I'd learned that surviving betrayal could build character rather than destroying it if you refuse to let other people's failures define your own potential. My parents had believed I wouldn't amount to much, but their betrayal had actually motivated me to achieve more than I might have accomplished in easier circumstances. Looking back, I realized my 20th birthday had marked the end of my childhood rather than the beginning of my adult life. The shocked young man who'd listened to his parents' casual cruelty had evolved into someone capable of demanding justice and building a better future despite their sabotage. The settlement was just money. Important money that secured educational opportunities and financial stability, but still just compensation for damages suffered. The real victory was psychological proving to myself that I deserved better treatment and had the strength to demand it regardless of family relationships or social expectations about forgiveness and loyalty. My parents had asked why I seemed distant during the months when I was working myself to exhaustion, while they enjoyed the social credit for my struggles. Now they knew exactly why our relationship had changed, and they understood that reconciliation would require years of consistent, honest behavior to overcome the damage their deception had caused. But that was their responsibility to manage, not mine to facilitate. I had a future to build with people who'd earned my trust through their actions rather than demanding it through their expectations. The 20-year-old who'd accepted betrayal with shocked silence had become someone who insisted on justice, respect, and honesty in all relationships. The lesson was clear: family should lift you up, not tear you down. When they choose to tear you down, you have every right to protect yourself and demand better, regardless of blood relationships or social pressure to forgive and forget. Some betrayals are too serious for easy forgiveness, and some people don't deserve second chances they haven't earned through genuine change. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal justice when the two seemed impossible to reconcile? How do you balance forgiveness with protecting yourself from people who've proven they can't be trusted? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you for following my story from that devastating birthday revelation through the legal battle that restored my future. If this resonated with your own experiences or helped you think differently about family relationships and personal boundaries, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity through determination and courage. Share this story with anyone who might be facing similar family financial abuse, or struggling to stand up for themselves against people who should be supporting them instead of sabotaging their dreams. Sometimes knowing you're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference in finding the strength to fight for the justice you deserve. Remember, you are worth fighting for, even when the people who should know that best have forgotten it themselves.